All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We have two distinguished speakers who are joining us today, Jeff Osmonson and Russ Ayers. This panel discussion is facilitated by Professor Ramineni from Nagarjuna University under University Grants Commission. Professor Ramineni has done several events in his lifetime, and he has been an amazing professor who has motivated the students of all stages and all walks for more than 25 years. And today he has picked an amazing topic for students as well as the people from industry, building the artificial intelligence solutions for business, and also what are the gaps from industry side and what are the pros and cons of this for the student side. So this panel discussion is facilitated by Sneha, that's me. And let me have the pleasure of introducing Jeff and Russ. Russ is Equifax SVP, Security, Architecture, Engineering, and a member of Equifax Global Securities Senior Leadership Team. In his role, Russ is actively involved in all aspects of security, architecture, and engineering, including strategic development and operational development of Equifax key security systems and applications. In previous roles for Equifax, Russ held the interim CSO position after the breach, as well as VP of Technology for several product lines, including KYC, KML, and marketing applications. Prior to joining Equifax, Russ worked as AVP of Product Development for Claritas, Nelson, Senior Engineer at Objective Interface Systems, and Harris Corporation, specializing in human interface design, large-scale data capture, analytics, and encryption. More than all these things, he's an amazing mentor, and I have direct experience working with him as a mentee for more than a year. Thank you, Russ, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful introduction. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. I have extremely composed and very senior leader, Jeff. Jeff Osmonson is a COO and Chief Process Improvement Officer at NextGen Technologies, serving over 250 clients in multiple market sectors. He was also a retail systems executive for Macy's for 39 years and led multiple technology initiatives that transformed their business solutions into the future. Jeff has also had an opportunity to be involved and led many projects for retail supply chain and selling floor solutions using RF, RFID, EDI, machine learning, predictive analytics, robotics, and cross-industry data leveraging. More than all those things, when he built the team, he knows the people, their life, and he was an amazing team leader. And he has mentored many people, and he has really touched their lives, and I am one of them. Thank you, Jeff, for joining. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Sneha. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Today we have an amazing topic, which is like most buzzword in the industry as well as in the academics. A lot of engineering students and MCA students have AI and ML in their fourth year, but how much that's being really learned, taught, practiced, and implemented? That's a question. And even though a lot of corporates have been using AI and ML for years, but there is a fine line. And let's explore what those details are. And we will go over the questions, and each of our super panelists will share their experience relating to their background, and then we'll come back and take more questions. So the first question is, we talk about artificial intelligence. Is it really good or bad? What are the pros and cons of it? So, Russ, can you go?
Absolutely. We've been using some form of artificial intelligence because it's an intelligence that's not human, right? So we've been using some form of that pretty much since we had a computer. The question that we're currently facing is how many of those things that are intelligent that live in the computer are not originated in the human. And this is a new place for us to be, but really it's just a continuum of what we've always done. When I was working on military systems back in the day, we already had some hint of those things because we wanted machines to be autonomous. They needed to control themselves, especially in weapons design and things like that. As we move over into applications, say 5 or 10 years after that, you can see that people started doing that for things like web analytics. There was too much data, there were too many things to look at, so you had to try to defer some of those decisions off to a machine that could keep up and get up to the speed of the market or the speed of the world. In the case, back I'd say 10 years after that initial use of AI. And we didn't really have a word for AI, but we were totally using it. Machine learning was definitely there. I think in true nature of technology, we likely got ahead of ourselves because the technology was moving at such a hectic pace. We didn't get enough time to review the ethics of the thing that we were doing. And so most of my focus has been making sure that when we take a technology, we apply the technology appropriately to get the humans what the humans are needing, right? And we lose sight of that often. So on the plus side, the rapid speed at which a computer can make a decision, the patterns that it can identify that a human can't, those are just enormously good. They're strangely large in number, and we couldn't even comprehend how positive that is. I think the challenge we have is we spend a ton of time figuring out how to apply those technologies. And on the downside, we don't pay that much attention to what the potential pitfalls or snags are related to humans. And so the two main elements I would try to tease out of what my experience has taught me as we go through these uses of AI in business is the business is naturally going to want to try to use this technology to its advantage, as it should. But we need to pay attention to the human factors that are going to cost us one way or another as we implement these solutions. So that's my take. I don't know, Jeff, if you got a different opinion about where on the retail side. But.
I would build on to what you're saying. The one positive or plus with artificial intelligence is its vast ability to analyze large amounts of data. I remember the days when we would print mounds of paper reports for people to page through that data in a report and highlight or put stars next to things that jumped out at them to help make business decisions. The con, I would say, is the trust factor. While artificial intelligence can go through a lot of data, and I look at artificial intelligence as very tactical. The human element is more strategic, so you're looking at the data. In the early days of retail, replenishment into the stores, knowing what product to order to replenish back into the stores, that was early AI work in the retail world. Transportation routing, knowing how to route trucks coming into your warehouses, there was a lot of AI activity there. Currently, there's a lot of things going on with fulfillment optimization, because now we're in a culture of the .com world and buying. The key, though, is trusting that data and knowing how that whole human factor, how do businesses leverage that data or information to make decisions, because artificial intelligence will give you the answers that the algorithms tell you to give you the answers for, whatever you program into it. It's then looking at it and then adjusting the algorithms and the programs as you're learning, and then machine learning kind of takes in with those programs that then help it over time learns. One of the things we did in supply chain is we were having problems with when does product show up at the warehouses then to go to the stores. Our accuracy level was about 55%. With artificial intelligence and learning, we were able to get to 88 to 92%. Well, that saves a corporation, especially large corporations, millions of dollars. But you have to trust that information. So it's got to be, it's going through those steps. I would say on this question, the biggest thing is that trust factor of the data that's coming out.
Thank you, Jeff. Russ, how does that relate to the different domains that you have worked in the past and current? You worked in different domains, and one is media, which is very exciting even today, and then credit, which is happening in the world today. So what do you see at a high level on the pros and cons of this AI and ML?
Right. Taking off of what Jeff was describing for your ability to trust it, the trust factor has a dark portion that we don't often talk about, which is if the machine identified a pattern, is that good? Well, the machine is not considering whether the pattern is good or bad, and there's the crux of the problem. So one of the things that we noticed when we were going through media, we were doing ads, right? And we were, especially when doing that work at a Nielsen scale, you're doing it across the entire country, the entire world. You now have a new channel, this new web channel at the time. Too much data to possibly look at. Same thing that Jeff was describing, only it was probably 1,000 times what any of us had comprehended. We all remember this moment. It was about the 11th hour of the day for what was going to be a 12-hour report. And we sort of all remember it. We were all looking at each other, seeing the clock tick up, and we needed to be done for the next day. But the data was growing at such a pace that the time it took us to generate the report was just now hitting the time it was going to take to produce the report. So we were going to be late. We could see it 2 days in advance, right? And so we started implementing some, machine techniques to try to process that content as fast as possible and then identify the patterns that we needed rather than having the human do what Jeff was describing, going through and sliding these things down. The trouble that we found, though, is it was fantastic at it. It was terrific. It could identify all of these unique patterns that we hadn't necessarily pulled out. And you would check that off on the pro list. But what if I told you that it only started sending people ads for things they believed in when it came to news articles, or it only sent them things that were broken on a socioeconomic level for things they would buy? And so in that case, it suddenly, in one instant, completely stratified what you would want to be more open and diverse. It completely created, 3,000 silos with no effort. There was no requirement for talking about it at all. It just said, yep, got it. Jeff happens to be this age. He happens to be this race. Mia happens to be this race. So let's just make sure that we only send them things that fits their race, whatever that is. We didn't even know it was going to do those aspects of it. And so you can see that pretty quickly. And when it's wrong, it's sort of great because you at least look at it and you can go, that's not good. That's not the problem, though. The ones that are obvious are actually pretty easy, and that's okay. It's the subtle ones that you don't see that are problematic. So now as you get into credit, part of what we want to do when we're offering folks credit is we want to make sure that it's available to everyone, and you want to be very careful about identifying a group that doesn't get it. And that needs to be a group that is extremely small. They've demonstrated a lack of repayment or fraud or whatever those things are. And then everybody else pretty much should get it at varying rates, of course, but you want to make sure that everybody gets it. Well, if you follow that same pattern I was talking about in media and you carry it through to credit, it is very, very dangerous for you to identify characteristics that are subtle, that never occurred to you. Like suddenly we find out that where you went to school is a pretty big indicator of how you're going to pay stuff back. Ooh, that's dangerous, because what you want to make sure that you're doing from a compliance perspective is that people could refute it. If something is present in the credit report, you want to make sure that somebody can go back to the credit furnisher and say, this is wrong, and then have them correct it. Well, how are you going to talk to a computer about the thing that they picked up was a pattern that is not correct? And it's a subtle sidestep of the thing that Jeff is describing. That's not even so much a trust factor, but it is for the people that are using it. For the people that are implementing it, it's very, very difficult to figure out how that machine came to that conclusion. So the way that Equifax handles that is to create something called explainable AI. And a lot of that has these tierings and steps where the model sort of has to explain itself, right? The machine has to explain itself and say, here's how I arrived at that conclusion. I use these two variables and these two conditions. And, you know, I think this was what Jeff and I were talking about one time. It's almost a misnomer in some cases, and probably better that we say artificial intelligence in these ways is also artificially intelligent. It's not really intelligent. It's artificial. It's made up. It's not thinking through the implications of those choices. It's simply looking for patterns in large data sets and doing what you asked it to do to train. And that's the part that we miss out on some. So, you know, I suspect a bunch of the situations Jeff was describing line up in a similar way as that, where, yep, the decision was concluded by a machine, but there's no way for you to make a direct connection back to what decision process it should have done. It simply will do.
It's unemotional. It's just, it's tactical. It's inputs and outputs. So it's going to give you the answers based on what the inputs are. So it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't judge. It doesn't, you know, it just tells you the patterns of the data. That's where then that trust factor with humans coming in and looking at the outputs from artificial intelligence. This is where I would say the humans bring in the strategic view of this, looking at it. Is this the direction? Is this right? What's this pattern telling us? And what decisions do we need to make from those patterns that, you know, machine learning and artificial intelligence is telling us?
Awesome.
So one element there that we may want to touch on a bit, Jeff, I think part of what we were discussing before, we have a super strong technical bend for model training, for making sure that you're going to get random data sets in. I don't think we spend almost any time with a few simple words related to those techniques. Is it good? Is it just? Is it ethical? Like, you don't hear those words at all when we're discussing the technical side of the modeling behaviors. And I think that's part of our trouble. We have to open the dialogue a bit and make sure that those inputs, one of the inputs that you're describing needs to be, is it the right thing?
Absolutely.
Russ, you just touched a very key aspect of the whole AI and ML, ethics of AI and ML. I know we can design the algorithms, we can identify the patterns, we can predict the things. Of course, system also can learn things on its own, and there's a predictable behavior and there is a not so predictable behavior. We can track all of it to some extent, and we can train the systems with the different kinds of data sets and large data sets. But there is a very fine line between what is ethical versus what is profitable in the corporate world. So how do we tackle that sensitive aspect of AI and ML?
Absolutely. If we look at even something like Tesla's review of the data that it has, right? That data goes back, it's processed in large content. Here's what the car was doing at the time when it was in auto mode. Here's what the car was doing when it was in manual mode. What decisions did the human make that the machine didn't make? But philosophers have been dealing with this problem for thousands and thousands of years. What is the ethical part? Needs of the one, needs of the many. These have already been discussed. And what I would argue is the best case for us is to look back on us behavior-wise from the past, and then apply those to the machine techniques we've got going for us in the future. If what you want to do is you want to say, I would like to increase human performance. I would like for all of us to be better. I would like for things to be cheaper. I would like for them to be faster. If you set those as criteria and qualities that you are training the overall meta model on, then I think what you're going to realize is if you did the same work on AI and ML as you expect AI and ML to do on itself in the model, right? You would find that we don't put the correct inputs in there. So what I would do is I would talk to the students, in this case, about what are the systems that you're building inside your own mind to understand whether something's ethical or not. Do you have a firm grasp on what you would say is ethical? A classic problem here, for example, that's maybe a nice thought experiment if you haven't considered it. You have a car approaching an intersection. There is no way to avoid the accident, by the way, so just get that out of your mind. You're not allowed to contrive it so that the car can avoid the accident. There's a mother with a stroller in the middle of the intersection. There are children playing on either side of the street. And there's your child over on the corner that would be the one place out. Well, in a situation like that, if you haven't thought through the scenarios appropriately to say, what is the most ethical choice there? If you were behind the wheel of that car, what would you want done? If you haven't thought through that circumstance, then there's no way for you to build a model or a computer program or a system that's going to be able to approximate your decision making because you've never done the decision. And it's very foolish for us to consider for computer science. If we haven't taught somebody how to add 2 + 2 = 4, we don't expect them to code 2 + 2 = 4. But for some reason, when it comes to artificial intelligence, which I think is, again, it's artificially intelligent, for some reason, when we get them there, we think that it's totally okay to have them build a system that they don't actually comprehend the results of. So that's what I would worry about.
So Jeff, coming to the retail world, the ethics are very different, right? For example, just before the Thanksgiving holiday or, any of those things, we feel like, the prices are slashing down and we have the huge discounts. And in fact, to a larger extent, that may be true, but I'm touching a very sensitive topic here, knowing that it is very sensitive. And you go back after 2 weeks or 3 weeks and the prices are so down, it's slashed down. One, it could be the sales or it could be the model is built like that. So, from a customer perspective, it may feel like, well, I would have bought after 2 weeks of the mad rush, or rather I would have bought in January versus I would have bought that in during Thanksgiving Day or Christmas. But here is the thing, from the data perspective, you would know the predictability of that. You have the data which actually help you to build the model. So in that kind of sensitive situation, knowing that you have the facts and figures in front of you, you could you could train the algorithm differently, or it becomes a little sensitive topic. How did you deal with that kind of situation, or how to draw a fine line being business and profitability versus sensitivity?
You know what? Here's where I would say, the tactical side of artificial intelligence and the strategic side of business kind of can play well together. So the example that you just gave, so using data and machine learning, you try to optimize what you're selling, when you're selling it, even to the point where the price point could be different in different markets. We have that capability based on what that demographic, what people will buy and the patterns within each demographic. So the artificial intelligence or machine learning helps you optimize the product, what you're selling, what you're doing, to what gets purchased. So like you said, right before Thanksgiving, or then it goes down in 2 weeks, the price goes down even more, whatever. I would say what the business side has done, though, to kind of bring that together is most retail businesses will say, if you came in 2 weeks later with the product and say hey, this is $10 less, they'll give you a credit for that $10. So that's the human factor side in retail, that while the machine learning artificial intelligence optimizes what gets sold and what price points. The human side of this says, however, if you're the customer, we want to make you happy. If you come in and say, hey, I see this is going down in price, they'll give you the credit or adjust your ticket.
Excellent point, Jeff. So you're saying that there is a model that we build, but there is a strategic initiative that the organization have already considered when the price point comes down, and there is a price matching that you do in the retail world, which actually balances out the things. Or is that the fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's where it brings in that human factor. You know, you want your customers to be happy. So you price things at a point in time where what the demand will be, what customers are willing to pay. But all that being said, you got to look at the lifetime value of a customer. And in doing that, you like I said, you'll make adjustments. Most retailers will gladly, with a smile on their face, give you the $10.
Yeah.
Because they want you to come back again and again and again. Got
it. So you touched it.
So tying these two things together, Jeff, I think that's the part where we're not doing a very good job as a business. There is really a meta thing on top of what is the individual email sort of operation you're engaged in at that moment. You're trying to maximize profit for the things you're selling at that moment. So a lot of times when somebody's given a task, that's what they're trying to train. That's the thing they're trying to get it to produce. When in reality, what you said, I believe, is much more important. Who's doing the same thing on lifetime value of the customer or happiness? What's happening is we're just getting wrapped up in that tactical piece of saying, how do we maximize this single transaction? And all you have to do is have the same logic, just take it one level up. Is the customer happy? And now do your same work and see what shakes out. That's the part that's missing.
Yeah. Yep.
And you guys have touched on my next question, the human emotions and human aspect in the robotic world. So there is a very open statement everywhere which say humans are becoming robots and robots are becoming more intelligent. So, this is, of course, we use it in our day-to-day conversations, and we feel so good and proud of building more smarter and smarter systems. Cities are smart, systems are smart, everybody is smart. So, but what is the role of a human aspect and human emotions and the security or insecurity feeling that goes in humans when we are building more smart and smarter systems, not just talking from the IT perspective, the implementation perspective and the tactical world. So,
you know what, I'm going to go back to the early days, the 1980s, early 90s, where product that was sent to a retailer in their distribution center required that each box had what was called a packing slip on it. And somebody had to manually open the box, look at the packing slip and see was everything inside the box that the packing slip said, check it in. It was an extremely manual process. As we started to apply data, and so having manufacturers send us the data that says, these are all the boxes I just sent you, this is the contents inside of the boxes, we no longer had to open every box. We would audit periodically to ensure the accuracy that was coming from a manufacturer. But what happened through having data and that automation process, and which is an element of artificial intelligence, it's all about the data. People's roles changed. So the person that used to have to open the box and check it, now their role changed to, I'm going to audit every 10th box or every 50th box, depending on the accuracy level of a manufacturer sending product. So the roles change when you introduce, technology, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And so it's being able, again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier. It's the data's tactical, the human element is more strategic, overseeing what's happening and making sure that we are maintaining a level of accuracy with the data.
An interesting side effect that we see whenever we're building anything, I saw this in my first couple of robots, right? You anthropomorphize that thing that you make because it's your creation and you want it to be something, right? Mary Shelley doing Frankenstein and all that. There's something about you creating something, and it causes you to, if not fall in love with it, certainly gain an attachment. And that's one of the risks you run when you create some new technology, is it has the potential to start some new life of its own that has an unintended consequence. What I would urge us to do is pull us back to what Jeff was describing in relationship to the human. If you can continuously make sure that you are thinking about whose life you're improving, it will tug you back at some point. Back to the packing slips, for example. If you're the person building that, I mean, I can envision someone sitting at the back office and Jeff is, talking to them, you got to get this fixed. It's a totally manual process. We could save tons of dollars. They run something that finds tons of dollars saved. That's not really the hard part. The hard part is those people that were doing tons of that manual work. What am I now going to deploy that human emotional capital towards, or that human brain power towards? What am I going to apply that towards now? Because that is one of the things that you found. It is also profit that this person is not doing a manual job that they hate doing and don't get a sense of fulfillment from. So that's profit too. But we don't focus so much on that. We focus on what we think the machine has an easy time measuring, which is not true at all. The machine will measure whatever it is that we give it to measure. And so maybe that's the main point that we would draw out about human emotions. You are going to become attached to the things that you create. You are going to try to make them do better. So if you have to choose, why don't you also choose to make those things better that make everybody else's life better?
So there is one follow-up question to the statement you just made, Russ. So, we definitely, there's the beneficiaries of the system will do a lot less redundant work, I would say, than what they used to do with the smarter systems. But there is also a factor called insecurity, thinking that there may be layoffs, there would be a reduction of the manpower. How do we deal with the human emotional aspect of implementation?
Now, the way I would approach these problems is I would try to stress to everyone who's involved, what is the value that we get in a human? Because that has not been replicated yet. And my argument would be we're a good distance away from being able to get a machine to bring the same thing that a human brings. What a human is very good at is identifying these patterns that have connections that are non-obvious or subtle, or however you want to describe it, and building on top of things, right? The humans have the ability to imagine a future situation and then live in the current situation while operating slowly to achieve the future objective. And there are a bunch of things that are similar to that humans are very good at. So why don't we teach people that you shouldn't necessarily feel comfortable when there's something that you're not that good at that's easily replicated. That's not what we should build your career on. Because if that's what we built your career on, we are setting you up for failure. I would rather try to convince the human to say, there are a ton of things you're fantastic at. Let's leverage the things that you're fantastic at and get that to be what your career is. And if we start doing that, I think we're going to find people will relax a bit when it comes to the manual thing that's getting slid off their plate, because they realize that means they are going to get more things on their plate that they like to eat, which is being creative, having intuition related to things, having personal connections with people as the social animals we are. So I think it's still that same continuum part. You have to understand what drives the humans. You have to understand what motivates them. what makes them feel good. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be able to put a career together for them that maximizes their life. And if you do that, they will want to move more of those things off their plate into the machine world. And that's where we've got to get to. Optimize the things that have the humans live better lives and let the machines help us do that.
You know what, you bring up, that's a very good point. And it's being open with people, one, to have them become part of the process, the improvement process. I've been doing continuous improvement most of my career. Don't make it a mystery to them. Let them contribute into the conversation. Let them see what the future is going to look like. Let them have conversations with them on what their role would look like in the future. Or what do you want your role to be? Because now you've got options that didn't exist. You know, I used to sit and open boxes and look at packing slips and count stuff. It's very repetitive. Now there's options to do other things, expand your capabilities. I think if you have those kind of conversations with people and they know that you have their best interest at heart and that you are, you know, we're trying to make things more efficient in the business, but at the same time, we're also trying to help people's careers grow and help them see what that looks like. That becomes a win-win between the business and the employees. Now you don't have people coming to work every day wondering, well, am I going to have a job tomorrow or next week or what's going on? Because then they become less productive because they're worried.
How many of those conversations, and how many of those conversations, Jeff, were you going in there and saying, hey, do you like doing this work? Is there anything that you think we should be doing with your time? Rather than having you just check these things on the boxes. Did we ever really have those conversations with folks about that, right? And if we did, how different would that frame what's coming next?
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, you're talking about inclusiveness of the team members in this process, communicating throughout and then maintaining the transparency, at the same time defining a new career path for the team and making them more empowered and enabled in human side of dealing with the customers, as well as enabling them with the better tools and techniques to do their job, or rather excel their job in to be aligned with the organization goals. This brings up the next topic, the tools and techniques. So all these questions that the points that we have discussed are from a different aspect of it. Now we have so many students probably listening to this conversation right now, and they will be thinking about, well, I am a BTech student, BE engineering student. I'm a master's in computer students, and I am from MBA, or like I don't have a technical degree, but I'm aspiring to go into, because I feel, I can do better analysis and I'm getting hang of it, or I want to be HR, or, there are various different kinds of students listening to this. So from the IT ecosystem, we can talk about various languages, various types of algorithms, and when we apply to one domain to other, it becomes rather more convoluted topic, and it becomes more specific to the problem that we were solving, depends on various other factors that we understand. But if a student is aspiring to start their career in AI and ML, it's a buzzword. And if they want to be the part of the digital transformation in their career, so what do they need to do? Where do they start? What are the tools and techniques that can really help them to, be into this world?
I would say the first thing is, what's your passion? You got to start with yourself here. Where do you want to go? What things resonate with you personally? And what areas? Is it in business? Is it in healthcare? Is it in, agriculture, education, whatever? First of all, determine what is it that excites you when you wake up every day? What do you think about? So before you start saying what tools or things, you need to determine what it is that drives you personally. Then identify what's happening, what are the trends, what's happening in the technology world in that area that you're passionate about. Spend a little time researching what's going on out there. Because when you're focused on the things that you're passionate about, you'll put forth the effort and time and intellectual capital to move more into that direction. Then now your interest level's a lot higher. You're out there looking, you're trying to see what's going on in the industry. You're trying to see what's happening in the news. You know, technology over the last couple years with the pandemic and everything is disrupted a lot of businesses in the way they function, the way things happen, the way businesses operate. What is it that's your passion that you would want to, what path do you want to go down? Then start researching that.
Yep, and I would obviously plus up on everything that Jeff described. Once you've got a sense of yourself, which is super important and cannot be understated, I'd say there are a few things that you can put in your bag of tricks that are never going to fail you. You need to be able to understand how to communicate with humans. We build software for humans, by humans, and it is usually for the betterment of humans. The common denominator is not a machine. The common denominator is a human being. Carbon-based life form at some point is who you're building this thing for. So get very good at being able to articulate it, because if you describe the wrong problem, you'll implement the wrong solution. The only thing that would come out of that would be a random chance that you accidentally stumbled upon the right outcome, which is not a good way to build any system. So one of the first things I would say you need to get good at is communicating with human beings. The next thing I would say is back to what I was saying for philosophy. If you don't understand what are ethical concerns, if you can't differentiate them, it's the same as you not being able to pick out Python versus Java as a choice in your language. It's the same thing. If you're unable to bring the ethos of whatever you're doing towards the problem you solve, you're not going to be able to get a good solution. So you get those two things inside you, right? You understand what is good about being a human and what we are here for and why we should be. And by the way, I'm about as libertarian a person as they make, and I am super capitalist. So if you think I'm sort of a touchy-feely person who's all about like peace, love, and happiness, the guy that works for Harris is not a peace, love, and happiness kind of guy. That's not the way that it works. It's better math. If you can do those things where you communicate better with people and you start understanding what being a human is about and how to make everybody's life better, it works out better for profit. It makes everything better if you do that. A monoculture is going to collapse in whatever way it slices the break. So as soon as there's any kind of fault line in that monoculture, it just breaks off. It's like a sheared ice sheet in the middle of Greenland or something, right? So we have to do better at building these skills into the people building these systems that says, there's a lot of factors at play. This thing can make super sharp decisions super quickly. Should it? And that is a very, very challenging question that only a human can solve. And back to the point we were making a second ago, that's what humans are really good at. Is this decision the right one, given all of the myriad of constraints? The machine can't do that, not now, and I hazard a guess it's going to be a very long time before they're able to determine what is right.
Thank you, Russ. We touched really two aspects of the whole discussion. One, we talked from the strategic point of view, there is, it's enabling the business, it's enabling the employees, and it enables the customers to do the things in a better way, which is a strategic way. And we talked about the entry-level students, how they can get into the industry, but what really passionate what is their real passion, how can they get into. But basics is like going back to what industry, what the human factor, if it is. So now we see the commonalities of what strategic initiatives that the organization is looking for is almost like the same kind of mindset that we are talking about the students here, because they will grow along with the organization. Now, the important thing that we haven't really touched is the middle management and the tactical view of the whole problem. We talk about AI, we talk about ML, and there is a new buzzword, the blockchain. Everybody talks about the blockchain, and we build the models. How easy it is to tweak these models, and how difficult it is to the results are produced. But they're, at the end of the day, we are so used to see the results and making the decisions of that. So how often we go back and tweak the models that we have built, or what is your recommendation for the tactical level of team who are sandwiched?
We want to understand what problem are we trying to solve, or what opportunity are we trying to create. That's so important. So taking the time to understand what are those pinch points, what are the things, and it's different. It's going to be different for every industry. So it's partnering with educators, partnering with business leaders, partnering with manufacturing leadership and things like that, understanding what are they trying to solve, what things are they dealing with every day that they're trying to get better at. That's, to me, the most important thing, is the partnerships and seek to understand. Six Sigma always talks about listening to the voice of the customer, understanding what the customer, and everybody's your customer, by the way. So it could be somebody on the team, it could be somebody in the business or whatever, but always trying to understand what's trying to be solved. Then taking the time to identify what connects, brainstorming sessions, getting a team together. As you come together, more thoughts, or a diversity of ideas will always win out of having multiple ideas and things that come into that conversation. So to me, those are the key elements to what you were asking, Sneha.
Thank you, Joe.
One of the elements of trying to get those folks together is a discussion about what is the skill set that you need to bring to it, which is what we talked about in the previous question. And the gist of that is really, you got to be able to communicate with those humans. And it's kind of drab for us to mention that to a person who's trying to figure out how to load this thing in Python into something that will run. Because that may be what's drawn them at this point. Hey, it's only technology that does this. Well, I'm here to tell you, not only is it not just technology that does this, if you are talking to somebody about the wrong problem, you'll implement the wrong solution. And so that Six Sigma approach of identifying the waste in the process, right? Because the waste in a process is something that doesn't deliver value. So it's an action you take that isn't delivering value. That's not going to go away. It's not going to go away if the machine identified what the value is, because somebody's still got to implement it, and that's probably a human. So if you double click on the element that Jeff was describing and think about what are the manager's responsibilities? Well, you have a sea of problems here. You have people that are implementing this tool or the technique. Maybe they don't fully understand the implications, so you need to teach them the implications. You have a group of people over here that are affected by the tool or the technique or the outcome or whatever, and somebody may need to talk to them. Like we said, be transparent. Here's what's coming. Here's what you might want to do about it. Career-wise, here's what you need to do. So part of what I would say is those people that are in the middle, we spend even less time with people who can help buffer that than we do teaching people who are building the models, is this the right thing to do? So it's even further away. The people in the middle likely have much more impact on whether or not this is going to be successful and whether or not it's just than the people who are on almost any of the other facets. And so for those team members that find themselves in that spot, ask you to consider, if you don't do it, then who is going to do it?
That's good.
You know what? One other thought that Russ, you triggered a thought, and we would spend a lot of time looking outside of our own industry also to see what technology and solutions were being discussed or developed. So while I grew up in the retail world, we spent time looking and talking to other market sectors, airlines, banking, just different, understand what they're doing, because that could trigger ideas that can improve in your own area. Things that I remember going down to the Delta offices and looking at some of the things that they were doing, and it gave us a lot of ideas when we started to move into the whole RFID space. Delta was ahead of us as far as trying to RFID their luggage going through airports and things like that. So always look outside of your own industry or whatever it is that you're focused on to see what's happening out there.
Jeff, you brought like two important aspects like RFID. When we did it in Macy's, the same thing, I happened to be the part of Delta RFID. The first thing they told, I have to quote this, they said, airport is considered, this is a giant warehouse of RFID. So
Yeah.
that means they also draw the inspiration from other industries. So just that reminded me that, okay, all right. And, we talk about industry is always looking for the talented people, and we don't have that many. There is a demand supply gap. And, the students coming out of colleges, they feel like, well, we studied like 20 different subjects and, we are not getting the jobs. Or like, even when you see in the already team who is working in the industry, at some time we feel that there is a skill gap. So they go through the skill training, the enhancements and all those things, but the industry institution interaction, and there is always a supply demand problem there. So I know we have to unlearn, relearn, and continuously learning. Everybody in the industry has to be a lifetime student. We know that, but the students may not be aware of this. So how do we fill the from the industry, since you two are representing the industry, how can we partner with like Professor Ramineni, or how the industries, how the institutions have the research centers working with the industries to fill in the gap? So is any thoughts on that?
We have a couple of programs that we use, and I would say they're terrific. I value the results that we get by partnering with the university and saying, here's some of the skill sets that we're looking for. What I would encourage not only the students, but also the teachers to do, though, is take the past into consideration as you're teaching students what to be good at. Don't teach them to be good at an individual technology, because that technology is probably going to change. Through my lifetime, I learned in my initial college period, which was 4 years, I learned 7 languages. Each of those 7 languages at one point or another was supposed to take over the world. Not only did those 7 languages not take over the world, so not only was that true, but a new language came out as soon as I actually got into the place where I was working. And so consistently what we've seen is technology is going to change. So what we need to teach people to do then is become better learners. You need to be better at assessing the tools and techniques that are working for you, double down on them. And the ones that aren't working for you or are likely not to be needed, you might want to tune those down. And if you have an hour to spend, maybe spend it on the things that are coming or that are better for you or get better results. That's what we need to teach kids coming out of school. What I'm seeing is going in the opposite direction. What I'm seeing is a student exiting and entering the workforce in a place that says, I only know how to do this thing. That's all I learned in college. This is what I know how to do. I know Python. That's it. And from my perspective, that's not very useful, because when the next Python comes, you're stuck. Versus you saying, I understand programming languages in general. I know how to articulate my wants to a machine and then measure the results to see if it happens. I know how to communicate with people about the requirements I send into the machine to get it done. If that is true, if you know how to do that, whatever language is coming later, whatever tech is coming later, I'll be able to use you in all those situations. That is what I believe we need to refocus our efforts on.
Yeah, I double ditto what Russ just said. We have to be lifelong learners. There's always going to be a technology that's going to come along that's going to disrupt what's already there. So you always have to kind of keep your mind open to what's going on and what new technologies are coming. You need to understand things, at a broad level so that you can then apply. How does that fit into with what I know right now? What do I need to learn? What skills? Lifelong learning is the key here. Technology is constantly changing, and you never know when something else is going to come along to disrupt what it is that we're doing today. And it will, over and over and over.
I don't want to date anything here, Jeff, so don't say anything about how you and I are in a particular age group. Let's leave that out. But what happened when there was a time we didn't have a cell phone and we had to arrive at the same place at the same time somewhere on the planet? Do we even remember what that skill was, right? We were remarking about this with a friend of mine. If we were several decades ago, and it's not that far ago, if we were that far back, we would have had to have done a bit of planning that is lost to most people because we didn't have the option to talk to each other again until we saw each other. Exactly. And so we need to get good at being able to relearn that. Now, I would argue it's better, right, Jeff? Because, you would be standing on the corner and I would be standing on the corner. It's the wrong corner and there's no way for us to talk to each other. So this is better because I can just pick it up and go, Jeff, where are you at? But it does mean that we had to relearn how to get those GPSs, how to get the texting going, how to making sure we were calling. Those are things that we didn't really learn how to learn. And that's what we've got to get better at. Applicability of that tech is only as useful as how we learn it. Exactly. I'm laughing as you're talking. I'm thinking, I remember having a pager, and you get a pager and then you get your Sprint card out to call them. And if you needed to talk to somebody, it was between pagers and calling cards to be able to communicate. It's just, so I laughed. Now we've got it really easy today compared to before. So yeah, technology, but to think about that, there was a day when pagers were the thing. Cell phones disrupted all of that with the ability to text and message and do all those kind of things. You used to have, you used to use MapQuest to find where you want to go, and then you had a piece of paper with you. Then you went to a Garmin, and now we have Google Maps. It's just, there's always going to be something coming along disrupting. So being a lifelong learner to understand what is the appropriate technology for today that applies, that we need to use to get our tasks done, our job done, things like that. Because tomorrow it's going to be something else.
True. Well articulated by both of you. What is that one advice that we can give to students and the teaching staff?
So my preference for most of the things we're doing in artificial intelligence and machine learning today is we need to think about what is the implication and consequence of what the technology is going to do. So that's what I would like for the students and the professors to think about. What is the outcome of that? It encompasses a lot of things. How do you know that somebody hasn't broken your model? How do you know that somebody hasn't cracked into your computer system and just nudged enough of the variables that they can get in front of the interest rate? How do you know that they don't know which shipping company you're going to use because they just modified your model and now they did it just enough to tilt towards somebody that they're invested in? There's a whole series of things that we don't think about as consequences today because we're not focused on necessarily what the output and the consequence is. Then you layer in that human trust factor, the human factor, what's in it for the humans. And as you see those two things together, if we just tilted our focus just a little and said, what is the benefit to the broader ecosystem, to the humans involved? I think that's going to pay dividends and reap rewards that we haven't even contemplated because we're operating on the right value chain. Yes, you can identify a pattern within the data that's going to make the business more profitable. Yes, you can. Why don't you focus at least a little bit of that attention on making the humans more profitable?
Thank you.
To what Russ was saying, and getting there, it's having the partnerships, it's embracing the technology, being a lifelong learner, and being open, because like Russ was saying, the ethical side of the decisions that are being made requires that constant conversation, that constant looking at what is the impact, what does the technology bring to the table, and what is the human factor, the human element, and how to partner and bring that together. Always be open to that, and then embrace the disruptors and the things like that. Don't fall on the sword with the technology that you're currently working on, because a lot of companies, businesses have gone under or gone out because they embraced what they had, but they didn't pay attention to what was going on outside of their own four walls. And then their company then went out of business or severely lost their market share or their competitiveness within the industry. So you always got to be paying attention to what's happening out there and be willing to learn, be a lifelong learner.
Thank you. So in a nutshell, you guys are saying, and I think we are all in an agreement, that artificial intelligence is artificially intelligent, and humans are smarter than that. I believe that's the conclusion. And the three things that we cannot ignore is human factor of the whole equation, and ethics in the business, and ethics in building the models, and training, retraining, and continuously training, whether it is your system, model, or human brain.
Yeah, I think what you're going to find is if you do all of those factors, you end up with a better outcome. You get a better output. And so that's what we should focus on. Get better results by treating people the way they should be treated, both on the learning side and on the consequence side. Absolutely.
And yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
I was going to say, I fully agree with Russ. I can't add to that. I mean, he nailed it.
Yeah, and one specific point that students may be thinking about is the technology. So the suggestion that Jeff and Russ, with their vast, probably like 50 plus or 60 years of experience, both put together, maybe more, I may be wrong right here, but looks like we need to really focus on our basic analytical skills and the data background, like, how we take the data, how we model the data, and how we process the data. And those are the basic things that we should be focusing, along with, a lot of mathematical models that will be applied on the data, but not so much on which language we are going to use versus what exactly we need to code. So it goes back to the algorithms. Students, if you are really ignoring your DA, that's what you call it in 3-2, designing algorithms. If you really don't take that subject seriously, looks like Jeff and Russ is asking you to go back and take that book and go back and brush up your DA.
That's right. And the reason that I would focus on those things, just to put a finer point on it, is not because it's not important, but just because of all the things, it's one of the easiest to learn.
Yep.
One of the hardest to learn is to appropriately identify value. That's one of the hardest things. So spend your time on making sure you're good at identifying value, because as far as your grid goes of value to effort, It's the thing that happens to get you the biggest outcome. If you pick the wrong value, you'll get the wrong solution. So you need to be good at identifying value and then squeezing the value out that you're trying to achieve. In that case, the least difficult thing in that whole equation to learn is the tool that you're going to use to try to achieve the value. The hardest thing is figuring out what's the right thing to measure, monitor, and achieve value in.
Absolutely. Fantastic conclusion. Any more points that you want to add, Jeff and Russ?
I think we've covered a lot of areas here within AI and machine learning. I would just encourage everyone to, again, find what it is you're passionate about, that you can then take this technology and drive it forward in the area of your interest, and always be willing to learn.
All right. Now I learned my lesson.
Yeah, that's right. And I really appreciate the chance for us to be able to discuss this. Had a great time talking with you and Jeff about this. There are things that we would want to impart to people that we believe are important. And I can only give you the analogy that makes sense to me. It might not make sense to you, but the way I view it is, there's music in everybody, okay? Your song is in there. Don't try to make somebody else's music. We're not interested in that. We want to know what your music is. And if that were the case, if we learn to appreciate everybody has a song in them, and we're trying to get that song out so we can all hear it and appreciate it, maybe it's a little less contentious if we get you into an environment and now you feel like you have to compete with somebody else. Because the real problem we have is a lack of multiple inputs arriving at a good value. As Jeff said, you have to be able to get multiple views of a problem. So I believe that 100%. I agree totally. And in my way to get as many ideas out as possible, I want to try to convince a student somewhere out there who currently isn't singing their song to pick up an instrument and start trying to play it. And that may be Python for you. It may be a business requirement that you're writing. It may be having a client meeting. It may be any number of those things, but please let your voice be heard in some way that makes beautiful music.
Awesome. Thank you, Russ and Jeff. I am sure hundreds and thousands of students will be beneficial to find their own passion, and they will be at least thinking about what their music is in their head. And one advice to the parents and teachers: if your song and your student's song is not the same, don't try to map it. Let them find their way. This is very important that I have to reiterate, because in Indian traditional education system, we actually group them and then we ask them to follow a certain pattern. So that actually delineates the whole idea of having AI and ML. So everybody has got their own algorithm. They just need to tune it. Thank you, Jeff and Russ. And I really thank my professor, Ramineni, and from University, Nagarjuna University and University Grants Commission for allowing us to have this beautiful panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.